Welcome back to the program. Let's go live to Ben Oquist and David Gazzard now. Gentlemen, let's start with the situation. David, first to you on the trade relationship with China. It makes up about 36% of our international trading, that bilateral economic relationship. It's interesting. There are a lot of positives in those economic ties, but you wouldn't know, given all the hot-headed comments that we've heard, not just mostly from the Chinese embassy, but also in parts of our political discourse as well, David.
For a quite unremarkable question about the origins of the COVID-19 virus and wanting to understand how it came into being, how it spread, what the underpinnings of that virus were, how it got out, things that the entire world seems to be asking at the moment. It seems to have escalated into a point that's not really in anyone's interest. It's not in Australia's interest to have China in this position. As you note, they're one of our largest, if not our largest, trading partner. I do think behind the scenes there's a lot of work being done by the most senior people reaching out to the Chinese to manage this. And the actions of China are in their own way quite unremarkable when you look at history. It was only last year they were denying access to Canadian beef to their market because there was an arrest of a Huawei figure in Ottawa, I think. So from a perspective historically, maybe this isn't the biggest thing in the world. And of course, Australian products are liked by the Chinese consumer. They like Australian beef. Australian barley goes into quality beer, so they like Australian barley. So whether that is enough in the end to bring them back to Australia, you'd hope so, but we'll have to wait and see.
And it's a good point, David, Ben Oquist, because to you on that point, picking up something that David's saying there about the Chinese keenness for Australian products, if you look at the amount of Chinese students now that have been here, their families, their friends and so on, visited, that we have had enough interaction, people-to-people links, to have that goodwill, at least at that level, towards what Australia represents, Ben.
Yeah, but something's going wrong diplomatically at the moment, isn't it? Australian Prime Minister hasn't been to China since Malcolm Turnbull went there at the end of 2016. And to me, this latest skirmish kind of underlines some trouble we've had over the last, probably 5 or 6 years, really, and partly been caught up in the tensions between the United States and China. And we're kind of falling victim to that, where we find ourselves in a difficult spot, being so closely tied to the United States, and more recently, Trump's irrationality and unreliability. So I think we're partly getting caught up in that. And I think it points to a wider problem. Yes, there's those good people-to-people relations, but there aren't at the diplomatic level good enough relations. And Australia has underestimated the importance of and underinvested in diplomacy. By some estimates, a kind of $2 billion cut over recent years, and then there's the foreign aid cuts on top of that. I think Australia's specific step up was kind of a recognition that we'd underinvested in diplomacy. Australia's going to have to do better on the diplomatic front. If we wanted that inquiry or that assessment into what went wrong in the release of this virus and the world's handling of it, we should have gone about it in a better way. I'll just finish with this. I heard this joke this week that does the rounds in diplomatic circles in Canberra, that Australian diplomacy is a bit like sex with your grandparents. You know it goes on somewhere, probably not very much, and you certainly don't want to look at it, because i.e. the estimation that we're not very smart at diplomacy, and when we do it doesn't look very good.
Yeah, well, David Gazzard, I won't get you to reflect on that particular analogy, but I am interested in your insights on Scott Morrison, because he's a pragmatist, isn't he? He's not some security hawk, is he, or ideological hawk when it comes to these things. He would want to get this back on track.
No, I think that's exactly right. But he's not going to be pushed around either needlessly when there's a global pandemic that the entire world wants to gain answers over. So we'll work constructively with Chinese officials to maintain those links. We've traditionally managed to balance our trade interests and security interests between the US, who's been historically our most important partner for sharing the democratic values and cultural values that we love and cherish in this country. But we've managed to balance that with our interests across Asia and with China. And this is no different to that. But I think the PM's put it quite correctly. And I don't think it has anything to do with our role in the South Pacific. We're going to stand up for our culture and our values. And the fact that some 132 other countries have come in behind our resolution to get those answers on what is a quite unremarkable question, I think is warranted and necessary. And we need to be able to stand up and answer for ourselves and not be pushed around on these sorts of matters, because it's exactly the sort of thing that everyone across the world is really wanting answers on. So Australia's had a leading role in that, and I don't think we're going to take a backward step on that. But China is still an incredibly important partner for us, and those two matters don't have to be incongruous in ways. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time on diplomacy, but also speaking out for the values of the Western world on public health issues.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's definitely the right balance if we can try and achieve that. Ben Oquist, what about the balance at the state level, the state-to-state borders? There's a bit of tension now, really, with Queensland and particularly New South Wales, Queensland, but of course WA, South Australia as well with their hard borders. What's your take on where this debate is at right now?
A couple of things. I did think it was pretty explosive of the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Paul Kelly, just to be saying recently that he could see no medical grounds for those state borders. I think that's going to ricochet around the states and cause some friction between the Commonwealth and the states. Of course, he did go on to say it is up to the states to put in place the restrictions that they want. It's up to them. So that's fair enough. But I do think that they were very strong statements from him just now that were broadcast on Sky. I do wonder, though, if the Prime Minister's kind of blaming the states sometimes for handling of issues. You know, the bushfires, he kind of sought to deflect blame onto New South Wales and how it was handling them. And then the Ruby Princess, I do wonder if that doesn't kind of blow back and bite him a bit and we don't get a national response. I think a national response would be better if these restrictions are a little bit more coordinated, notwithstanding the constitutional right of the states to do it. I think people would get a clearer message if they were done better, and hearing the same thing from Anastasia Palaszczuk as they are from Gladys Berejiklian, and the Prime Minister could pull that together a bit more. But he has had a habit of kind of deflecting blame onto the states. Of course, strategically, this can work in his interest now, as there's a clamour to get the economy going again. And if it doesn't get going again fast enough, he's able to say, well, it's the state's fault. So they didn't lift restrictions and lift those borders fast enough.
Yeah. David, your thoughts on this? So we've got about a minute left, but your reflections on this tension right now between not just federal and state, but between states?
I haven't heard the PM say anything about state border closures, which were taken individually by the states. I have heard Simon Birmingham, the tourism minister, say it's a matter for the industry in Queensland, where, of course, the state closures have probably been the most acute over the last couple of days, and there's a willingness among the industry to get the borders open so they can have people come up and have holidays. And I don't think that is out of line at all. I do think what is going to happen here is the states are going to start competing amongst themselves to gain tourism. That's going to be one flashpoint. And if some of the states want to adopt sort of a parochial line that they're going to keep their state borders closed, they're going to lose business to other states that open up earlier. So everyone understands that there's a public health issue here, and people want to see the virus controlled before they open things up willy-nilly. But by the same token, there's going to be a fast mover advantage to states like New South Wales that are are letting people go back into tourist resorts earlier than some of the others. And that's the way to be sorted out. It's the market talking.
Yep, it'll be interesting to see how quickly Queensland will move on under the pressure of that industry, which it's so dependent on as well. David, Ben, talk to you next week. Thanks so much. And stay with us on Sky News after the break. Chris Kenny with the Kenny Report, including he's going to be speaking to Angus Taylor during the program. Stay with us.
For the latest updates and the facts that matter,
The situation is serious and rapidly changing.
listen to Sky News Australia, live on iHeartRadio. Real news when you need it most.
To keep us all safe and to help our health workers, it's vital to know quickly if you've come in contact with someone who has tested positive for coronavirus. It's why we've introduced the COVID Safe app. With your privacy protected by law, COVID Safe keeps a secure note of other users you've been near if you have to go out. So, if they test positive for coronavirus, you'll be notified. It'll help us stop the spread sooner so we can get back to the things we love. Download COVID Safe today. Authorised by the Chief Medical Officer, Canberra.
For 20 years, you've been fighting to save people money on their car and home insurance. Who are you?
Budget Direct, helping Australians save on insurance.
A box set streaming mother and a mix uploading brother.